Hey Lake Point, Pastor Michael here to get you caught up on the fourth week of our series, Dollars and Cents. A series where we're looking at what the Bible really communicates about money. A series that is all about kingdom stewardship. One of the big ideas that we've looked at is how stewardship is about wisdom, not wealth. It's about handling money in a way that reflects the wisdom of our King, Jesus. And this week we looked at how part of our stewardship responsibilities are to spend wisely. Now, way back in 1920, a financial scam emerged that people still try to pull off in various ways today. It's known as a Ponzi scheme, named after the infamous Charles Ponzi. How the scheme works is pretty straightforward. Promise your investors incredible returns, but simply pay those returns using the investments you receive from new investors, not from money you generated from real investment. And you can keep the merry-go-round going as long as you're able to get more people to invest while making sure not too many people pull their money out. Now, spoiler alert, these scams always end badly. But what if I told you that you might be the victim of a Ponzi scheme? What's more, what if I told you that you're not only a victim, you're also potentially the perpetrator of a Ponzi scheme? Now, before you get offended, hear me out. Truth is, millions of Canadians are. You see, without even realizing it, we end up running what amounts to a Ponzi scheme on ourselves. When you step outside your means and you start using credit or financing to buy something you can't actually afford, when you go into debt, whether it be for furniture or for a car or for electronics or for a house or really for anything else, you're borrowing from your future in order to pay your present. You're committing money you haven't received yet to buy something that you want now. And it's a scam and it's stealing. It's a scam committed against yourself and it's a theft from your own future. Piling up debt today that you presume you'll be able to pay with money you expect to earn in the future is essentially running a Ponzi scheme on yourself. Now, hopefully this isn't shocking to you, but God is against stealing. However, what many followers of Jesus fail to appreciate is that spending money you don't have is a form of stealing. How? It's stealing from your future and from your family's future. Think of it this way, when you go into debt, you're reaching into the future and you're robbing yourself of choices. You're robbing yourself of freedom. You're robbing yourself of peace. And that's pretty messed up. Here's the thing. This actually reveals a deeper issue. It reveals something that is an epidemic and incredibly toxic to the human soul. It reveals our inability to wait. We want what we want and we want it now. And maybe you're tempted to dismiss going into debt as no big deal because you've gone away with it for so long, but eventually it catches up with you. Eventually, debt creates a stranglehold on your life, and eventually it affects the impact God planned for you to have. Debt is a vicious cycle. And so the question is, how do you break the cycle of debt? Simple answer, stop spending money you don't have. How do you stop spending money you don't have? By learning to wait. Now, allow me to show you why this is the way of kingdom stewardship. Allow me to read to you a verse written by the Apostle Paul. Now, to clarify, he's not talking about money here, but he's communicating something deeply profound about humanity that we need to explore because it ultimately relates to money. Paul writes this, he says, "For in hope we have been saved, but hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he already sees?" Allow me to paraphrase. Why would someone keep hoping for something they already have? Once you have something, you stop hoping for it. And here's what Paul is trying to drive home to his readers. God wired you to operate on hope. Hope is more than just wishing. It is a powerful spiritual force that God uniquely created us to contain in our hearts. He created it to serve as a fuel for perseverance. Hope empowers you to delay gratification so that you can experience true deep joy and satisfaction when the thing for which you've hoped finally becomes reality. Need a biblical example? Think about Abraham. You can read a story in the book of Genesis. At a key moment in his life, Abraham was told that he would be the father of a nation, the father of a nation that God would use to bless the whole world. Problem is, Abraham and his wife were getting old and they had no kids. Now, this is no big deal for God. He's God. And so he tells Abraham that despite the perceived obstacles, Abraham would be given a son through his wife, Sarah. However, the promise isn't immediately fulfilled. And so as the years drag on, God seems to be dragging his feet. And Abraham gets tired of waiting, and so he does what many of us often do. He tries to make something happen in his own power. He looks for and he finds a shortcut. That shortcut was to father a child through his concubine, Hagar. Now, Just like people who borrow from the future to obtain what they desire in the present, the birth of Ishmael created nothing but problems and heartache. And we don't have time to unpack that whole part of the story, but know that things get messy. What we see though is eventually Abraham goes back to waiting on God and ultimately through faith sees God's promise fulfilled. And do you know what fueled Abraham's faith-filled waiting? Paul tells us, he writes in Romans, even when there was no reason for hope, Abraham kept hoping, believing that he would become the father of many nations. There's that word again, hope. My friends, God wired you so that if you wanted something that is good and from him, you would be filled with hope. You see, God cares about the process. There is value in the process. There is growth in the process. And hope is what keeps you sticking to the process. And I promise you, when the day of fulfillment arrives, when you reach that goal, whatever it may be, you experience a quality of joy and satisfaction that is both meaningful and long-lasting. Folks, this is why debt is so insidious. Borrowing kills hope. Throwing down a credit card when you want something rather than planning and saving, it destroys the process. The buy now and pay later lifestyle is financial suicide both individually and as a culture. Personal indebtedness among Canadians is soaring. Depression rates are soaring. These two statistics, they're related. Why? Because we're violating a key principle concerning the way God created us. We're designed to run on hope, and borrowing is a killer of hope. The levels of debt in which we've buried ourselves is unprecedented in human history. It may surprise you to learn that many of the debt instruments so readily available today are actually relatively recent inventions. For example, mortgages, as we currently understand them, weren't widely available or in use until the mid-1930s. The credit card was also essentially invented by American Airlines in the 1930s. At the time, air travel was so expensive, only the wealthy could afford to fly, and so American Airlines came up with the idea of a card that would allow middle-class folks to purchase a ticket with the card and then pay it out in a few installments. Fly now, pay later. Other airlines quickly followed suit. And then eventually, around 1960, one of the first true credit cards emerged in the form of the Bank of America card, now called Visa. This card enabled consumers to carry a balance from month to month and, of course, begin to incur hefty interest charges. The Western world has never been the same. Never. The fact is that ever since, most in our society are drowning in a sea of debt. So let me ask you, is it any wonder that as a culture we are becoming the most depressed people on earth? We killed our hope. We stole from our future to pay our present in history's largest Ponzi scheme, and we pulled it off on ourselves. My friends, if you're in a cycle of debt, it's time to break the cycle. It's time to move back to hope. It's time to start spending wisely. How? Stop spending money you don't have and start learning how to wait. If you're watching this and you feel you don't have any hope left, it may be because upon self-reflection, you'll discover you're living without any trust. When push comes to shove, you don't truly trust that God will provide. You don't believe him. You don't trust him to bless you, and so, like Abraham, you take the blessing into your own hands and you've tried to bless yourself. And if that's you, like Abraham, it's time to get back on track and move back into God's wisdom and timing, because you're only scamming yourself out of peace, freedom, growth, and quite possibly the kingdom purposes God has for your life. Well, friends, thanks for listening. Enjoy jumping in discussion questions. I'll see you next time.